Hello and welcome. I am Exit Light and this is my channel. I am coming to you today to tell you a story, and it's not an easy one for me to tell. In fact, I'm terrified to tell this story, but I need to make sure that people hear it. So that in case something strange happens to me, in case I don't come home one day or never post another video on this channel, I need to know that people have heard the story. I need you to know that I'm not planning on running away. I'm not planning an accident. I'm not planning to be found, in my home, maybe not alive. I have no reason to up and disappear. No matter what it looks like, please question it. That's all I'm asking. Do you understand? All right. This is how it started. A man named Dale Conrad had worked for Yellowstone Park in the United States National Parklands for about 20 years. He'd had co-workers come and go and had seen a lot of strange things in the parks. I was told that he was the man to go to if you wanted to hear about the missing 411 cases in the park, and he knew about people who had gone missing that had not even been reported missing. I've been told by so many people in my comments that this is the guy that I should get a hold of. So what a lot of you may not know about me is that I am extremely shy. And it took up a little time to get my nerve built up to send him an email. And by the time I did, I figured that, the worst thing that could happen was that he would just say no or not even get back to me. And you just don't know until you ask, right? So when he reluctantly agreed, I knew that I needed to get out there as quickly as possible before he changed his mind. And I took my best friend with me. And I really had no choice because she's listened to so many 411 videos that she was not about to let me go to Yellowstone by myself. I joked with her that if she was going to go and we were ever walking in and we were in a position where we had to line up like on a thin, narrow trail, that she was going to be last, because I'd done a podcast and one of the common threads is that the person walking last is the person that disappears and is never seen again or is never seen alive again. So anyway, I got us the first flights out, and we took just the bare essentials to stay in the cabin in Yellowstone for a couple of nights. We took warm clothes, and if you know anything about these 411 cases, you know that one of the first things mentioned is that they didn't have clothes warm enough. So I'm not stupid, and if it was 112 degrees out, I was still going to bring a flannel shirt and jeans and hiking boots and some hats, and we took some mace. Yes, I took mace. I'm not going to lie. Penny, my friend, went to Bass Pro and got us both a couple of those pink keychain style mace canisters, and I wasn't going to turn that down. Also, we both made sure that we were going to keep our cell phones on us at all times, period. Like, we wanted to have, a GPS that could track us. We wanted our phones pinging off every tower possible. So we had made a plan that we were not going to put our phones in our pockets, but we were going to tape them to our sides, like to our ribs. And I had watched this self-defense video one time, and it recommended that if you're going into like a dangerous country or something, you tape a razor blade to your side so that if you are kidnapped and your hands are tied up, you can reach the razor blade and untie the ropes. So That's where I got my idea. When we landed, Dale came and picked us up in his really old pickup truck. It was nothing fancy. It wasn't even modern. It was on an AM radio playing Ring of Fire. And Dale was sort of whistling along. Finally, he broke that uncomfortable weirdness, and he said, so you make some type of movies? And I told him that no, I make content on YouTube. And he cocked his head at me and looked like I had just spoken to him in a different language. And I said, videos. I make videos. And he said, so like real short movies? And I nodded and said, yeah, kind of, basically. And then he said, and your friend here? And she said, I'm Penny, and I'm just here for support. He chuckled and said, support? You planning on needing support, Missy? And, continued to chuckle. And I told him that she was interested in these cases too, so I figured I'd just bring her along. Well, I always say, the more the merrier, he said. And then, so what is it exactly that you ladies are looking for? And I started to tell him, well, to be honest, I was told that you're the man to come to for stories about strange disappearances in the park. And he replied, well, you was told right. I've seen it all. Children taken right from their tents. Fishermen leaving all their equipment, even their boots. Gone. Never seen again. One woman who claimed to have seen a large dog-type animal or something. We looked for it. Figured she must have seen a bear or a coyote. Never found anything. But the next day, all that was left of her was her entrails. You know what entrails are, right? He asked, looking at Penny. Penny replied in a squeaky little voice, guts? Yep. Never did find that big dog, though. But I've seen some weird things, he said. I asked him if he'd mind maybe showing us where some of these things had happened, and he said he'd be happy to. We arrived at our cabin by the park and game offices and put what little we had in there and headed out with Dale. I brought my camera with us, of course, so I could snap some pictures for the video, and we hiked along several different trails with him stopping every so often to point out a location. Sometimes there were old faded ribbons wrapped around a tree, or a weather-torn teddy bear leaning up against a tree, staring into nothingness, as if waiting and watching for their child to return. We went off the trails and saw a cross which looked to have been white at some point. There were some stones on it, a faded friendship bracelet, and a best sister ever sash. And while we were walking and looking, he told us the stories of those people who'd gone missing. He noted that nearly all of them had never been seen again. Dale seemed to take a liking to Penny, and she coaxed him into letting me take photos of him next to some of these memorials that the family and friends had left. But he was really insistent that nobody smile. He said it would be disrespectful, and of course, I agree 100%. At one point, though, he did lean into Penny, and the best way I can describe it, what he did was he sniffed her hair, almost like a dog when they're getting to know you, Penny didn't even seem to notice. She was busy talking to me and talking to me about how the photo turned out. Anyway, by that time, we decided to go back. We nobody, I didn't want to be out there when it became dark. And when we got to our cabin, someone had left us covered plates with meatloaf and mashed potatoes, carrots, and a couple pieces of chocolate cake. Dale said, "Ah, that'd be my wife, Ellen. She's like that. She'll fatten you up if you let her." And he kind of laughed. He showed us where to use the outhouse, and Penny and I both knew that we would rather hold it all night than to leave the cabin and walk to an outhouse in a national park. But he assured us that everything was fine, and as long as we took a flashlight and sort of waved it around, it would scare away anything. And Penny asked, "What exactly is anything?" And Dale replied, "Oh, you know, skunks and whatnot. You don't want to meet up with a pissed-off skunk, I can tell you that." And he laughed as he told us the story of his son, who he said had been about 4 at the time, and he found a skunk in their backyard, and he thought it was a cat, and he went to pick it up. Took 2 weeks, straight tomato and vinegar baths to get him to smell right. To this day, I can't stand the smell of vinegar. He left us, and it was about dark, and we locked the door really good and ate our dinner, and we were grateful for the food. I didn't even know that I was starving. We had really not eaten all day, and when we were with Dale, we were really wrapped up in the stories. Penny said, "Oh my God," with her mouth full, "Can this woman adopt me, please? This is so good." And we were both dead tired and decided to get some sleep so we could wake up early and maybe take a look around by ourselves for a little bit before we met up with Dale. I wanted to go down to the river and take a couple of photos. As I was laying there, I heard Penny's stomach rumble, and she kind of went, "Oh." And I asked her if she was okay, and she said, yeah, that she thought she'd eaten too fast and her stomach was hurting her a little bit, but she'd be fine. I remembered to call my dad real quick because I had told him I would call when I got there, and I hadn't. So I ripped the tape off of my rib area and called my dad, and then I went and got the duct tape out of my bag and then taped it back again. I was dead tired. I fell asleep right after that, and I woke up when the sun was just starting to rise. The tape was sort of making my stomach itch. I said, "Hey Penny, you awake?" And then there was no reply. My back was to her, so I asked again, "Hey Penny, you ready to get up?" And there was still not an answer, not even a grunt or go back to sleep. So I turned around and she wasn't in her bed. I jumped up and got my jeans on and went out to the door and started calling her name. A man about, 20 years old came out of the office, and he said, "Hey, how's your friend doing?" I had never met this man before in my life, so I was confused. So I asked him, "My friend?" And he said, "Yeah, Penny, right? She came in last night and asked for some toilet paper, said her stomach was hurting her real bad." And I stood there in disbelief. "She left our cabin?" I asked him. "Yeah, about, 2 or 3 maybe. Poor thing. Fresh air ain't for everyone, I guess." And I turned and started to walk towards the outhouse, thinking that she must be there. Of course she was there. Why wouldn't she be there? And why hadn't she woke me up to go with her? I was a little confused by the whole situation. And then I knocked on the door and kind of called in, "Hey Penny, I heard you're feeling like crap." Pun intended, by the way. And then I waited there and there was no response. So I called in again. Penny, seriously, what's up? And there was nothing, so I grabbed the handle and tugged the door open. It was empty, except for Penny's hat, her knit hat, and there were 2, maybe 3 drops of blood. I started for yelling her, and I mean, I was this close to a panic attack kind of yelling. And that's when Dale ran down the path and he asked me if I was okay. He was out of breath, and I said, yeah, but Penny, and I couldn't get it out of my mouth, and he was demanding, what, girl, what? And I felt like I was having this out-of-body experience. My head felt faint. His voice sounded far off. If you've ever stood up too fast and had that woozy feeling, he picked me up and sort of ran back with me to the office, sat me down in a chair and told me to put my head between my knees. And I did. So then he said, now tell me, where is that friend of yours? And I was crying now. I said, I don't get it. I don't understand. I don't know. She wouldn't have left. But she did. That guy told me that he saw her. And I scanned the room because there was a lot of people standing in there now. And I saw the guy who I'd talked to, and I pointed at him. And I mean, he was a kid, really, not more than 20 years old. He had red hair, brown eyes. Dale turned towards him and said, Scott, what did you see? And Scott told him exactly the same thing that he told me about the toilet paper and her not feeling well. Dale got on his radio and called for help. He turned to me and he put his hands on my shoulders. And he said, look at me. I'm sure she's fine. People wander off sometimes. A lot, really. You'd be surprised. Maybe she thought she'd taken a short walk, and it would help her feel better. Is there anywhere she might have gone to see? I told him that we were going to go down to the river later, but I didn't think she would go without me. And she didn't take my camera. And I said, but her hat is in the outhouse. And there's some blood. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, okay. These things can look bad without context. It's okay. You never know. Pine cones and needles, rocks, all kinds of things that can cut a hand or a foot. And, I supposed that he was right about that. 9 hours. 2 dog searches, 1 helicopter, 30 men and women on foot. And there was nothing. She was gone. She'd vanished. I didn't want to leave, but I was scheduled to leave on our flight. And I just didn't know what to do. Dale came over to me and said, listen, you can't help anymore. Let these people do their jobs. Go home, get a good night's sleep, and if you need to, pack up some more clothes and come back refreshed. Her parents are on their way now. I knew that he was right. There wasn't anything for me to do. I'd gone over and over and over everything. Had I forgotten something she'd said? Had I forgotten that she said she wanted to take a walk? I know she wouldn't have gone to take a walk. We had talked about it. About how nervous she was about me going to a national park. I know it might seem ridiculous, but I know she didn't go for a walk. I asked him to let me know if they found her. I needed to come back and be there when they found her. I needed to tell her how pissed off I was for scaring me. I needed to hug her so tight. A police car pulled up next to me, and Dale got me into the car and told me that he'd call. Don't worry, I'll call. He shut the door, and that's when I remembered that her phone was taped to her side. I lifted my shirt up and I ripped the phone off of my ribs, and I dialed her phone number. I could have sworn that I heard it ring. I rolled down my window, and I swear there was a very faint ringing. Dale dropped the hand that he had been waving with and hurriedly walked back into the office. And I couldn't help but watch him. When he went in there, I couldn't hear that faint ringing anymore. Is it weird that I wondered if it was in his pocket or inside of him? On the ride to the airport, I told the officer about Penny's phone being taped to her side. I thought that was useful information. Maybe they could track it. Maybe they could hear it ringing. About 4 weeks later, I received a phone call from a reporter asking me for a comment about Dale. I didn't understand what they were talking about. I was confused. And she said, Dale Conrad. He's been arrested for killing a woman in Yellowstone. They suspect that he's done it before. Boy, he's a real nutcase. He thinks he's a werewolf. Any statement from you? Of course, my mind shot back to that ringing telephone and the way he had smelled her hair. The fact that she'd gotten sick after eating dinner that night and I hadn't. I realized that nobody had even found her flashlight. I muttered to the reporter and I said, that's crazy. Are they sure he did it? And she replied, yes. They say that he's the guy. An officer told me that he's been a suspect for about a year now. A year? I asked. How was he allowed to continue working for a year? And she had no answers for me. I told her that I didn't have a comment. And my throat felt like it was closing in, and I could hardly breathe. And now that I've told you the story, and his name is out there, and I've been wondering, are there werewolves? If you like this story, please give it a thumbs up. If you are not already but would like to be, it is completely free to push that subscribe button. If you'd like to be notified when my content goes up or when we go live for a podcast, go ahead and click that bell. If you would consider supporting this channel and my work through Patreon, I would be so grateful. The link will be down in the comments. The money is going towards merchandise that we can give away and will be available for you to purchase if you feel so inclined. Good night.